The focus of this session is around KPIs and how KPIs can be used within your organization if you're running Datascope WMS. The co-host with me today is Tom Juris. Tom is the head of IT within a company called American Metalcraft, or AMC. They've run our software for some time. And we're going to talk through various KPIs, how they, what KPIs have been applied to their business and why, and keep it a fairly open discussion around KPIs in general, right? You are able to post questions on the webinar. Please go ahead and do so. We will address them at the end of the session. But as you think of something, if you want to ask a question, pop it into the Q&A section and we will address those towards the end. All right, so let's move straight on from here. So a little bit about KPIs in general and why you would want to put KPIs into your business. I'm going to start with a few points here. I think the first thing is the level of data that Datascope WMS gives you is an enormous wealth of data. When you put Datascope into the software or into your business, it tracks pretty much all the movements of inventory, provided you've implemented those particular transactions. But it gives us a lot more detail than that. We understand based on the data what transactions were done, when they were done, who did them, what order they refer to. So maybe it's a transaction related to a purchase order or GRN number or a sales order or a job. We know who did the transaction. We know exactly the date and time of that transaction, and therefore, when Datascope is running in a business, it's building up this big block of really important data that can be used within the operation. And what we see is that the better run businesses that use our software tend to take it the extra step and take that data and actually make it available in the form of KPIs and reports, etc. And they use it to manage the business, right? But what we also see is that quite a number of our customers are not exploiting the data that is available to them. And we felt to do the session to really expose the kind of things that can be done to use that data in the day-to-day management of your operation. If you look at that data and when you want to take that data and expose it to the front end in the form of KPIs, so this is not necessarily reporting, but more KPIs, these are graphs, etc. We tend to find that there are two major categories of KPI. There's the statistics KPIs, and then there's alert KPIs. Statistics KPIs are where we are measuring the actual day-to-day transactions to get statistics out of the business. So a typical example of that would be, how did my pickers do yesterday? How did my job receiving terminals out in the factory, how did they perform yesterday? On an hour-by-hour basis, how many receipts were done, for what sort of quantities of units, etc., right? So statistics is really to tell us how the business is doing. It might be yesterday, it might be for the week, it might be so far today, right? Alert KPIs is a very different way of presenting a KPI, and that is more KPIs that tell us that we need to do something. A typical one would be something like a KPI that measures the number of pallet IDs or track IDs that are inside a receiving bin that have been there for longer than 5 days, as an example. So I may have a KPI that then says, I've got all of these receiving bins, and within these receiving bins, I have pallets that have been standing there for 5 days, and I want to know about it, right? That's a typical alert KPI. The idea of those KPIs are more to kind of manage the operation and then see where there is something that is not running as smoothly as it should, and then obviously to sort of dig in and go and understand what's happening in that section of the operation, right? Then just a little point on data-driven organizations in general. So what we are seeing, and I actually wrote an article on this about 2 years ago about data-driven organizations, and that is that the more modern operations today are using data more and more in their daily operational meetings. So instead of having a sort of an ops meeting, production meeting, a distribution management meeting on a daily basis, where the discussion is more just sort of a general discussion on certain things, the progressive organizations are actually basing those meetings on data. So when you come into a daily operational meeting, you are specifically discussing measures, right? You're looking at reports, KPIs, etc., and then dealing with them. And as long as the KPI is under control, you simply move on. But if a KPI shows you that something is going wrong, then obviously your operational meeting then looks at that. But you're using the actual data layer underneath to make those decisions. And we want to encourage people to do that on a more regular basis. And then the last point I want to just touch on is using KPIs out in the operation. So, and this is around people performance, and this is just our experience. So from our experience over the years, particularly in distribution centers, but it can be in factories too, but especially in distribution centers, what we find is that if you put KPIs there at a person's name level, right? In other words, you say, this is the picking statistics so far today. And you actually have the people's names there and a little bar graph that shows this guy's picked 100 cartons today, this guy's picked 1,000 cartons today. That type of display of the KPIs drives people performance, right? So what we have seen is where these kind of screens are put into operations, we see that a certain amount of peer pressure comes into that operation. People start to kind of see who's performing and who's not, who's working really hard and who's not. It's up on a big a screen or a number of screens through the operation, and it becomes very clear around the performance of people. And what tends to happen is the guy that's slacking a little bit tends to either move on or he ups his game a bit because he realizes that he's not even producing half of what the top guy is doing, right? And so we want to encourage again. Some companies are a little hesitant to go right down to an individual name level. We understand that sometimes if there's a 2 or 3 shift operation, they'll do the measure at a shift. So shift 1 did this volume, shift 2 did that volume. But we have found that going right down to people's name level has a really big and a good impact, right? So I think when we talk about KPIs, these are the kind of things that we are suggesting that you put into place, right? So now we're going to go into a bit of a demo, and really there's 2 sections to this demo. Firstly, we've asked AMC or Tom from AMC to share his KPIs, some of his KPIs. They've done a really great job on using the Datascope data to portray measures within their distribution operation. So we're gonna let Tom kind of explain what they did and why and how and just some of the key KPIs they've done. And then once he's done, he'll hand back over to me and I'll go into kind of the KPI module that exists within the Datascope software and just give a brief overview of what is there so that if you want to start using it, you're aware of where it is and kind of more or less how it works. So with that, without further ado, I'd hand over then to Tom. Tom, can you take it from there?
Absolutely. So hi, everybody. I'm Tom Jurcik. I'm the Director of IT at American Metalcraft. I've been with the company about 22 years at this point. I started part-time in the warehouse back in the summers when I was still in school. And over the years, kind of worked my way up and got to where I am today. So, you know, by doing that, I've gotten a lot of experience with business processes and operations and everything. And especially in terms of the warehouse, I worked a lot there. So it kind of helped me understand the whole Datascope process and everything when we decided to implement. And that kind of helped with the whole process of converting all of our old manual processes into more data-driven processes with Datascope. A little bit of background on AMC. So we're a family-owned business. We've been in business about 75 years. We're a restaurant supply company. We primarily distribute restaurant supplies like dinnerware and tabletop accessories, pretty much anything you'd find when you go to a nice restaurant, whether it's, plates or, like risers or anything that you might have your food in. We try to be, trendy in that respect and have some cool ideas, things that you won't find everywhere else. And so that's what we kind of positioned our business in the last 20, 30 years. And it's worked out well for us. We're located in Franklin Park, Illinois. We're right outside Chicago. And so just kind of like I was saying, I'd say about 20 years ago, we were probably 80-20 from manufacturing to distribution. Most of our business was just manufacturing. We were doing a lot of pizza supplies and everything, and that was the bread and butter of our business. But we shifted at that point, and over the last 20 years, we've kind of shifted to, we're pretty much the opposite. We're 80-20 now, distribution and manufacturing. Still do pizza trays and banquet covers and everything, but we have a much more robust product line in terms of all the dinnerware and tabletop accessories. And so that's kind of, aside from the growth in business, that's kind of what led us to a need for WMS, because just the normal CISPRO product wasn't really cutting it anymore. And we needed to, up our game in the warehouse operations. And just to give you a little bit of an idea on our warehouse, it's about 100,000 square feet. We're a single facility. We also have our offices attached to it as well. It's not included in that square footage. Our lower levels, our lower rackings are pick faces. Some of those are split into two if we have really small pick faces or items. Otherwise, everything above that first level is all bulk level. And so we do either reach truck picks from those, or it's just bulk storage until we need it to replenish for pick face. And I'd say our main operations that we're using with Datascope are LCT and TO receipts, and also job receipts. And then we're using Datascope for the whole order management process. So everything from order release to picking, packing, and then actually shipping it out. We're using a third-party integration with, they used to be called ADSI, now they're called Logistics. And that's what we're using for our small parcel integration to get the shipping labels out and the orders out the door. So, going back to when we went live at Datascope, we started in 2016, and we actually went live early 2017. And again, just, before our implementation, before we, decided on Datascope, we were just very inefficient. We were probably, I'd say, about a good 2 weeks behind on our orders. And we couldn't find anything, especially, we'd moved a couple of years before that. And, in the move, a lot of the products got lost, and we had people driving up and down the aisles with, we have a little golf cart and like the binoculars, and people were trying to find our product that way. And so between that and, and we're just a very paper reliant processes in the warehouse. So we had, for example, all our back orders, we'd print all our sales orders out, and then people were managing the sales orders and back orders on those printouts. And then we actually had a filing cabinet for back orders that we were using to pull back orders from. And I think they were filed by like the first item on the order was just, it was a mess. And we laugh, we don't know how we survived before all this, but we did, and we got to that point. And we even had, I know, Post-its we were using for pulling stock from overstock. Somebody would say, something's not there in the pick face. We'd write down the location for the item in overstock, give it to a reach truck driver. He would go pull the product down, let us know it's back, and then we tell the picker, hey, you can go back and pick the order. So just very inefficient, very paper-based and manual processes, and we knew we needed to change, otherwise we wouldn't be able to survive. So I know most of you are probably on Datascope already, so I'm not going to go into the whole implementation. But after the implementation, all these issues were resolved. So we were much more efficient. We were shipping same day, I'd say within a few weeks. We went from 2 shifts and mandatory overtime every day and in Saturdays to just 1 shift and just overtime as needed. So we were doing great. You know, everything is much more quicker and more efficient. But, you know, now that we were doing everything so much more quickly and differently, we needed a new way to be able to manage the process. And I'll give you one example, because our president and CEO, he used to walk around on the floor and take a look at everything. And he would look at the packing tables, and he would look at the orders, the stack of orders sitting on the table out in the warehouse. And he'd see a whole big stack of orders, and he would see like just skids of product waiting at the packing tables. And he'd say, oh, you know, we're doing great. It's going to be a busy day, or it's going to be a good day for invoicing. You know, he was happy. So that first week that we went live with Datascope, there was no papers out there. There were, you know, all the tables were empty, and he kept coming over, and he's worried. And he said, you know, hey, you know, we're not shipping anything. You know, I don't see anything out there. You know, what's going on? What's the problem? And we had to keep reassuring him that, hey, you know, we're shipping everything. It's just much more efficient now. You're just not going to see all the physical inventory out in the warehouse. It's, you know, it's everything's shifted to now everything's managed in the system, and we're releasing on demand, and we're just not going to see that, but we can guarantee you that, you know, we're shipping it out. And so with that, we found that we needed to have something that he could see, you know, throughout the day, that we could prove that we're actually, you know, much more efficient, and that we were shipping everything out just like we needed to. And so that's where we found, actually is before we implemented Datascope, but we found this business intelligence solution called Domo that we were implementing at the same time of Datascope. And we thought, okay, well, this is a great opportunity to test out Domo, see if it's going to work for us by taking Datascope data that we have now and putting it into Domo. And so that's what we did. So we took Datascope, at the time there was no KPI module, so we took Datascope reports and like the standard things that that they recommended that we, you know, keep an eye on a daily basis, put those into Domo. We came up with cards and graphs and charts, and then some of the existing on-demand reports, whether we ran them in Crystal reports or anything, it's just for reporting services. We put some of those metrics into Domo as well. And this way we could see it throughout the day, because the great thing about Domo is that it's pretty much live information. It updates on a regular basis, depending on how often you want to update it. And, you know, there's a mobile app, there's everything else that people can see and just continue to look at it. So, you know, when our CEO wasn't there, he could still keep an eye on it, looking at the web page or app and see what we were doing. So we thought, you know, we went this route, and we said, okay, well, this is what's going to prove that, you know, we're actually shipping everything out better than before, and that things are getting out the door. So out of all the metrics, I'd say the two that were most important right when we went live were expected to ship dollars, because that was making our CEO happy, because he could see, okay, here's all the dollars I have sitting in picking, here's all the dollars I have sitting in packing, and here's the stuff that's already been staged and is in the truck or ready to go out the door. And then the other thing, which is actually a bunch of different metrics, but were our warehouse worker stats. And so that's kind of like Anton just mentioned about the displaying that in the warehouse so that everybody can see what they're doing. We did this right away. We had a TV in the warehouse with a little Android stick that just, you know, had a web page focused on the Domo cards, and it would just cycle through all the stats. So we had picker stats, you know, lines picked, boxes picked, you know, orders picked, and same thing for packers, you know, lines, boxes, Picslips. And then we had replenishment stats, cycle count stats. Basically, every job function in the warehouse, there was a name, you know, and their number of orders, boxes, whatever on each graph, so that throughout the day, you know, especially as we were first learning, people could see, oh, wow, like, you know, I'm close to the top, or, you know, I'm doing well, you know, I'm going to keep it up, or, you know, I'm towards the middle or the bottom, like maybe there's more I can do, or I can, you know, get extra training, or, you know, ask our managers for help and see if there's something I could do. So that really helped drive the buy-in with Datascope, so that people, you know, knew that it was working, and that, you know, they were trying to be the best, which is great, because I think, you know, positive, you know, reinforcement is probably better than, you know, negative reinforcement. We didn't want to, you know, punish people for being at the bottom. We wanted to get people to want to be at the top, and that's what showing these KPIs really did for us. And it helped, you know, get people better at using the Datascope product, and you know, wanting to be, you know, at the top of their their peers. And so since then, this is what, 4 or 5 years ago at this point, we've used Domo to build dashboards for every department. So each department has their own dashboard that they look at daily. There's, all the live metrics that update, and, it's just a combination of different information. We've got Syspro information, Datascope. We have that information joined so they can, get different metrics on different things in the system. And they're using all that information on a daily basis to, make decisions throughout the day, whether it's, those alert KPIs that Anton was talking about, where, you're managing exceptions, or just, strategic or, long-term, decisions to say, hey, we've got, we have a lot of sample orders that are being entered lately. Is this something you want to keep up? Why is the increase in samples? Look at the cost that this is costing us. And is there something, we need to do to do something to convert these into real orders? Just, so many different metrics. And so, what I'm going to show you today is just a few cards from our warehouse dashboard. And I've cleaned them up a little bit just to hide, employee names and dollars and everything, but just to give you an idea of what different things you could do that are not like out of the box, Datascope, or just maybe it's something that, you don't even have right now for a report or any type of metric, but things that we use every day that really help us run our business. And just a reminder too, so I'm showing you all this in Domo, but this is not a Domo sales pitch. You can do this in any KPI, any KPI service, and especially the Datascope one. There's most of these are probably right out of the box, included with that. So if I just share my screen for a moment here. Okay, so.
You got it, yeah.
Is my screen showing now?
Yeah, Tom, we can see it.
Okay, great.
Clearly. Yeah.
All right. So here's our dashboard. Again, these are just a few of the cards that are on our warehouse page. I pulled them over for this webinar, but I'm just going to go through each one just for a couple minutes and just kind of give you an idea of the business case for it, what we're doing with it, and just show you some of the information that we're using from Datascope. So I'll start here. So here's picker stats. So this is just like I was talking about for our warehouse our workers. This exact card, aside from showing their actual name and not their initials, this is up in our warehouse and just cycling through every day. So this is one just based on lines picked for the day. And these are actually, all these stats right now that I'm going to show you are all live stats in our system. So today, so far, we've picked 349 lines. And the person with the initials MO is at the top here with 48. And this will just keep updating throughout the day. And you can see that, JH down here is slacking a bit, but that may be for a number of reasons. He may be on other job functions and he's just jumping into this, or maybe he's just, he started late or for whatever reason. But, hopefully these will all start evening out throughout the day. And so the great thing about Domo is that you can drill in and you can see, if you want to get more information on any of these stats, I can click on the initials MO here and I can see, all the stats from today, the time picked, the date picked, picking slip number, the stock code, the quantity, and the mass. And, this is all, as you know, right from Datascope. And so we're just pulling this into to Domo and looking at it right here. So, we can filter, we can do all different types of things with this data. So, if we wanted to find, this L1102 stock code, like who picked it today, maybe there's an issue where we have to, pull them all back from, being shipped for whatever reason. We can do a quick search, find all that, and get that back, get that corrected before everything ships out. So, this is one example of the picker stats. But again, we probably had I'd say about 8 or 9 cards between pickers, packers, cycle counters, replen, and reach truck drivers, just to track, what they're doing throughout the day. It helps us keep an eye on performance and to, make sure that everybody's working throughout the day. And so then another card that's not necessarily related to performance is this open Picslips card. So this is more of a recent card. We're showing this to all the employees in the warehouse, but typically, I'd say in the last 2-3 months, we've been really behind certain days on orders because as everybody knows, there's a shipping crisis out there now, and everything's out of stock, and so we're facing the same issues. And so some days we might get 2 or 3 trucks in, 2 or 3 LCT shipments that might have 20 items each. And so on those days, we want to get out the orders as soon as possible. So we're just releasing all these back orders. And so, those are the days that we're, setting up overtime and having everybody work to try to get everything out as soon as possible. So we wanted to be as transparent as possible to our users so that they kind of have an idea on if they're going to be working overtime, by like midday. And so by their second break, we set this arbitrary number to 200 here that we kind of figured is a good indication on if we're behind or not. And if we've got over 200 Picslips open at their second break, they know that we're going to have to work overtime so that we can get these cleaned out and shipped out so that we don't fall behind for the rest of the week. And so it's worked really well. I will say that for a while, some of our users thought we were just based on the time we were releasing everything, people thought that it's almost a little too transparent sometimes because they thought that we were waiting until right around their next break and then releasing everything at once, making them have to work overtime. We had to explain that, it's not like we want to work overtime either, but it's just kind of funny that, we were trying to be transparent and it kind of, for a little while, had the opposite effect. But I think we're all good now. It's just, it kind of helps, by defining this, this number of 200, it helps us to have to not just say, hey, we're working overtime, and people question it and say, well, why are we working overtime? It's kind of laid out in we're a union shop, so it's laid out in the union contract, and we've got that out there to that they're going to have to work overtime in those situations. So it helps just with the transparency, so we know if we're falling behind, and if they're going to have to work overtime. And again, you can click through and you can see all the different statuses here, and when we released everything, if we need to get to that level of detail. Now, this is the expected to ship by location. So this has been cleaned up a little bit, but this is what basically we showed our president when we went live to kind of show him what's going out. And this is dollars based before, and now this is just number of Picslips, I believe. But it just gives you an idea. We use checkout put away when we're finished picking an order so that we can put the order to a table. And so that's the information that you're seeing here. So when we put it away to here, we've got table G or table I. I think we have about 20 packing tables, just FYI. And this gives us an idea on workload. So, if we see that, a picker has, this guy's got 18, but this person here only has 3. So then, it might be, freight orders, or it might be just that, nobody's dropped off, any picking slips to that table recently. And so, then we'll, direct somebody next time you've got some orders, send them over to table E. And this way it kind of spreads out the workload, and you don't have one table that's got all the orders and other tables that don't. And so again, looking for an order or anything, you can click into any of these and you can see the details and sales order number and everything else associated with that, that Picslip. Now this one's a good one. This one we just implemented recently as well. There's already in Datascope, there's a report to let you know about mass taxation checkout mass overrides. So, in the event that, Datascope thinks a box should weigh 10 pounds and you've got a box that weighs 20 pounds, then you're going to get, based on your threshold, you're going to get an alert saying, hey, you can't ship this box because, it weighs way too much and you need a supervisor override. And so what this does is anytime there's a supervisor override, again, just it's already Datascope information. It'll pop up on this list so we can review it later. So a funny story about this is, we did this recently, I'd say about 3 weeks ago, and we found that I think the day we tried it, we had like 50 or 60 overrides. And we thought, wow, that's a lot of overrides. Why do we have so many? And so we started looking, and we saw all these operators were basically two of our super users. And so we talked to them and we said, hey, what about this order? Why did you have an override here? This was a huge override. Why did you do this? And he said, I didn't do that. I don't know what you're talking about. And so we found that, when the supervisors were going to override on the users' computers, the users were catching on to their passwords. And so instead of even going to the supervisor, they would get the override screen, and they would just go in and they would put in the supervisor's password and then just bypass the override. So by checking out this KPI, we caught on to that, and so we changed their passwords, and we had to talk with all the users to make sure that they're not doing that. But that's something that we wouldn't even come to our attention if we weren't tracking that metric. And so, now what we're using this for is, aside from making sure that we're not getting any, bypassed overrides from our super users, but, this will tell us, hey, maybe our, since this is based on the item mass in CISPRO, maybe the item mass is incorrect, or maybe, somebody packed a box wrong because, this one is off 339%. So maybe they're, missing something, or they put too much in that box, and that's not what they packed in Datascope. And so we can go back and review these and, get an idea for, what's happening. And then we can help, we can correct any long-term issues like incorrect item mass, and then also correct any short-term issues where somebody maybe packed the box wrong, or, is just, not using the software correctly and continually getting incorrect mass checkouts. So that's been really helpful lately to clean up some of those issues. And so now here's another one. This is most replenished stock codes over the last 3 months. So what we're using this for is to get an idea on the stock codes that we're replenishing very often. And by doing that, we can get an idea from maybe if our pick faces are too small. So this item, for example, out of all the items, this one is replenished 30 times. So it's about, there's a few other ones that are close to that, but everything else, even at the most, is about half that. So that would indicate that maybe we need to go back and find that, wherever that pick face is, and maybe it's one of those half locations that we can turn into a full location, because we're just hitting that too many times, and we only have so many reach truck drivers. And by doing this 30 times, let's say if we should have done this only 15 times, that's 15 replenishments that we could have allocated to other items to get those in quicker and not hold up the process anywhere else. And so by reviewing this regularly, we could see that we could change our pick face sizes. And then also, it just overall will help us, change our warehouse layout, and, just find if there's anything else going on there with, maybe, some guy is just going in there and, continually replenishing the same item just to, for busy work, whatever it is, just to try to get it up as numbers. But either way, it's giving us an idea on, these outliers and these exceptions, and we can go in and we can try to get to the bottom of it. And again, if you're not reviewing these, regularly, then it's not going to mean anything. You won't catch them. But by looking at this normally, you can see that that maybe there's an issue there that we need to resolve. And so this one is kind of a space utilization card that we're using for our warehouse, and it's pallets less than 50% full. So at one point, a couple of years ago, we ran out of space in our warehouse, and so we had to find a way to add space. And so what we did was we switched from single SKU to multi-SKU, and we started doing pallet consolidations to, anytime that we had a bin utilization that was less than 50%, we tried to add something on there to free up spaces. And so what this particular card tells us is that, we have 1,400 bulk bins that are utilized less than 50%. And so, in a pinch, if we had to, we could consolidate, a couple of these, into, 2 positions into one. And so we could free up about 700 bins if we had to, get a lot of space quickly. And, and that would help us, with a big incoming shipment or anything like that. And then you could see here too, we're also splitting it by 2-item pellets, 3-item pellets, or 4-item pellets, just to keep an idea, on how many of these multi-SKU pellets that we actually have. And then this is also kind of related to warehouse space, but these are all bulk positions containing D-class items or discontinued items. And again, just, in the pinch, if we needed to free up a lot of space quickly, we could look here and say, okay, well, these are all items, if they're not moving or they're discontinued already, we could scrap them or sell them off to, a wholesaler or whatever, and, get these positions opened up because they're just taking up space from our other high moving items that we could also, be utilizing that space. And so we use this very often to go in and say, okay, well, these are all, these are our cleanup items, or once an item is marked discontinued officially, then we can go in and we could, just clean up those bins right away without having to do too much searching. And then last on the bin position things is product velocity. So what we're using this for is to figure out how to optimize our warehouse with the high moving items towards the front, and to have less travel to those high moving items and those slower moving items towards the back. And so this looks a little lopsided right now, only because even our better selling items right now may be out of stock, so that they're, they look like they're not moving as much, but they really, we just didn't have the stock to actually move them. But what we do is go in here and say, okay, well, this item is a candidate for moving forward because, it's towards the back of the warehouse and we're doing at least 1 pick a day. So, we can move this one up and, swap it with something else in the back. And that, results in less traveling, less walking, and as a result, quicker picks. And now just on to the alert KPIs really quickly. Amazon is, I'm sure a lot of you probably deal with Amazon. They're a headache to deal with, but we just started doing a special freight program with them with EDI. And so what this card does is allows us to manage the whole process, because we need to, pack up the order first, send them the shipping details, and then get those shipping details back along with their Amazon's preferred ship method. And then we, finish the shipment in our end and then ship it out. And so based on custom fields in Syspro, this will manage the process throughout based on that shipping status. And it lets us know where our orders are and if there's anything that needs to be any like extra attention. Like this one, we're still waiting to ship. We've already got the instructions, so we need to go in there and figure out why those 2 items are still in suspense. And so that helps us manage that whole process without having to try to search things manually. And then this one is for if a customer got the wrong item and they want to keep it, so we're billing them for it. In those cases, what we do is we put in the sales order in this fake billing only warehouse. The billing only warehouse goes negative, and then that will pop up on here, which will then trigger the warehouse to have to do a cycle count and an adjustment to zero out that fake warehouse, and then also make sure that our counts are correct in our main warehouse. And so anytime there's something that pops up on here, the warehouse gets an alert, and then they know to go in and do a cycle count on that item. And then this is also a recent one that we did for recent receipts, that this is visibility throughout the whole company, because we were, since we were behind on a lot of orders, we wanted to make sure that we knew when orders were coming in for certain suppliers. And so especially for sales, we were using this so that when a new receipt comes in, it'll pop in here and they'll see that it's highlighted and that it came in today, and that they can go in and they can even view to see what the items are and what the quantities were. And then they know to tell their customers, hey, we got this in, we know it'll be shipping soon. So, you can expect it very soon. And then the last one I'll show here is delayed orders not dispatched. So this is a card that, we get orders sometimes where a customer just wants to hold stock, or they want to, they have an opening for a store and they want to get it shipped, but not right away until the store is open. And so this, based on the priority in SysPro and the shipping date, we can tell, hey, these orders are coming up. We need to make sure that we get them shipped out so that they arrive to the customer's location when they need it by. And so if there's anything that is falling behind or in danger, it'll pop up right on here, and the warehouse gets an alert saying that they need to do something about this. And so, with that, I'll start turning things over back to Anton. I will just mention, though, as far as KPIs, two things that we learned throughout this whole process are you need to make sure that your data is clean, because, with bad data or, trying to do metrics on anything that is not, not cleaned up or not standardized, you might as well not even do metrics at all, because it's just not going to give you good information. And then also, as you're building these KPIs out, just make sure that you're verifying that the information is correct before you turn them over to production and put them out to the different departments. Because again, for the same reason, if you're showing the wrong information, then you're making decisions on the wrong information. And again, the whole system of KPIs breaks down. So just remember those couple of things to make sure that your data is clean and that you're verifying it, and you should be good. And with that, I'll turn things back over to Anton so he can show you a little bit about the Datascope KPI module.
Cool. Thanks very much, Tom. That was really interesting. Just bearing in mind that Tom just showed us a range of KPIs that he did. The AMC have a lot more than that, but just to give the kind of flavor of what they're measuring and why. I just want to very briefly mention that within the Datascope software, we have the KPI module. So where you'll find it is up at the top, launch HTML5. Within there, you will find the HTML5 scanner screens and the KPI screens. If you open up the KPI screens, I'm just going to give you a very, very high level overview quickly of what this module basically does. Firstly, I want to be clear, this is not an equivalent to Domo or Power BI or any sort of intelligent BI tool. It's not intended to be, and it never will be, right? With Domo, you have the ability to drill into multiple levels, etc. The front end that we've created is a fairly flat structure that allows us to very easily create some KPIs. It's a great starting point, but I think most customers would use it to start with, would get most of their measures out onto the floor using this tool. But if you really want to get clever about it, you will then purchase a Domo or a Power BI or something like that. Let me just give you a brief overview. So the module ships standard with a whole bunch of standard KPIs. These are standard ones that will come with the software. And just to kind of look at a few of those and how they would look. I mean, this is a typical one that says, these are all picking slips that are in started state against usernames. Another one would be things like this one here, which is past due reservation lines for picking slips. So these are old reservation lines. We'll just pick one or two more of them. This is a bin utilization one that just says how many bins are utilized above 80% of the bin, and how many bins are underutilized, where we're using less than 20% of the bin. So there's a whole range of standard ones. Then you can create your own ones. We've got a few little ones in here. I'll just show you a typical one. This is one that we've done on network latency. So this is actually managing the latency of your network, and it's actually showing you, it's pinging a scanner across the network, and it's giving us where the latency is. And obviously you can see like there was a bad latency situation where the call to the scanner and back took a long time. But the idea is that you can use these My KPIs to create your own ones. And just very briefly, you use the design tool at the bottom here to create a new KPI. When you create the KPI, we have a little WYSIWYG here that allows us to give a name to that KPI, the kind of chart that you want of that KPI. And then basically behind every KPI is simply a stored procedure, right? So we've created this in a very simplistic manner. If you can go to your reseller, your DSP, your partner, and ask them to create a number of stored procedures on data. You can possibly do it yourselves if you have some development skills in-house. Create these stored procedures that run on the data, collate the data into a summary, and then present that summary into one of these graphs, right? And then you would just simply set the accesses here, the date range it must apply to, etc., and create your own KPI off the fly, right? So standard KPIs are in the software. New KPIs would appear here, any ones that you customize and create yourself. And then you can create dashboards, right? So down under the design tool, there's a new dashboard. You can open up a brand new dashboard, similar WYSIWYG. I'll just show you one I've done previously. So here's a typical dashboard. There's my picking slips in certain statuses, my bin utilization for different warehouses, some picking stats against different pickers. But the idea of the dashboard is once I've taken either a standard KPI or I've created my own KPIs, I can then add them to the dashboard, right? And the dashboard then has multiple. And the idea of this is that you can then go and put this on a large screen or screens. So I could create a dashboard for receiving, for picking, for packing, for production, and I could go and put a number of measures onto that particular dashboard, put it up on a large screen in your warehouse, and against these you can set like a timer that every 15 minutes it refreshes and it actually moves the graphs around, right? So it will put one from the bottom up to the top and move them around. But again, just to be clear, you can't drill into these things. They don't go drill down into the data. That's more of a BI tool, but they are great for sharing data kind of on an hour-by-hour basis through the day out on the floor. So just wanted to show you that you know what is there. Encourage you to obviously use that that module and you know, work with your partner to actually implement some key KPI measures out on your floor. With that, we're going to wrap up. I do not see any questions coming through, so we're not going to specifically address any questions. Just what I would say is we are going to try to encourage our customers to join in on sessions like this. In the case of Tom joining us, if you have any, if you're using Datascope in a specific way and you would like to jointly join a webinar to explain what you've done and why, we think it's great for the community. So we'd like to encourage you to do that. And then just in wrapping up, our next webinar is scheduled for December the 2nd. At this point, we're not sure what we'll be showing there. But obviously we will send out a webinar invite closer to the time to join that webinar as well. So without further ado, I think we're pretty much done. I hope it was a great session. I hope it was giving you some thought processes to come and do these sort of things in your own business. So thank you, Tom, for your assistance too. And we look forward to seeing you again in the next webinar.